Testing. All right, there we go. Thanks, Austin, for the great intro. I think before we dive into it, we can have our panel just very quickly introduce themselves if we want to go down the line.
Yeah, sure. Amy Wu, partner at Lightspeed, and I lead our crypto and gaming investing. We just announced a $100 million fund along with FTX and Solana.
My name is Alex Paley, co-founder and CEO of Faraway, and Amy just led our Series A along with Colleen and Solana.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Liu, the technical lead with Star Atlas, and been working in crypto DeFi space for 5-6 years now, project to project, and this is my most favorite one yet.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. So to set the groundwork a little bit, Amy, I guess maybe this is a question for you. How do we think about what's different about Web3 games versus traditional Web2 games?
So how I think about it is, first and foremost, in terms of the shift from Web 2 to Web 3 gaming, starts with an ideological one. And we're basically moving from Web 2 centralized profit making to a Web 3 more decentralized profit sharing between creators, and users. And this is a really important shift that, game publishers and companies in Web 2 need to really understand. And so when we talk about Web 3 gaming, it involves various use cases of blockchain in gaming. And so I think we're starting to see some of these use cases come out, like, for example, using NFTs as a pre-launch user acquisition and community building drive, and then also tokenized currencies. And the thing is that these concepts in terms of digital assets and also in-game currencies have been around for decades in the gaming world. And so it's such a natural extension of that to actually incorporate blockchain tech. And I think some of the things that you can do is you can deepen game economies, you can increase velocity of transactions in these games, and also introduce a lot of different strategies you can incorporate in terms of different segments of your gamers as well.
Awesome.
No, I was going to say, I think it's also the difference between an open economy and a closed economy. Right? In a free-to-play game, the economy is created and live operated by either the GM of that game, the game designers, or the live ops managers. And in a Web3 economy, it's open by definition and intrinsically, right? Because peer-to-peer trading is automatically enabled. And in a free-to-play type of game design, you would think that if you enabled peer-to-peer trading, that would be an insane decision. Right? It would be very, very controversial because it typically breaks a lot of the free-to-play game loops that you'd see in most free-to-play games today. So I think it really, like Amy said, deepens the economies and makes things a lot more open.
Awesome. So actually, double-clicking on that a little bit, what's different? What kind of game loops can we now create that we couldn't before? And I guess that's a question for both Alex and Michael, since you guys are thinking pretty deeply about that.
Sure.
Go ahead.
So the question was, what can we do differently now than we could before? Yeah, the realism of the transfers and the transactions to the user, and capturing that dream for your typical gamer. Because when you think about it, in the gaming space, traditionally, you have this experience, and you're crafting something for a user, regardless of the genre of the game. And now, it not only becomes something that's a pastime, but it could be a full-time as well. And it's really interesting how, with DeFi integrations into gaming, this becomes someone's career as opposed to somebody's hobby.
It's pretty interesting because if you look at any MMO, right, you kill a monster, you get gold. Now all of a sudden that gold is freely tradable in an open market. So, like Michael was saying, that opens up a lot of DeFi applications, and it opens up a lot of more social interactions between our players, right? They no longer are, all of the currency they own is now freely tradable, right? They can do anything they want with it. And I think that just, like I was saying before, just makes these economies much more interesting. and much more similar to a IRL type of economy.
Yeah, so you guys touched on a big thing, which is now there's money involved. Like I, as a player, can earn these in-game assets, and I can also sell them. How do you think that changes the psychology of gaming for Web3 gaming? Because now it's not just purely fun. Now there's money that I might make.
Yeah, there's money involved, and I think people will play these games in many different types of ways, right? It's like we're making a shooter, but just like you've seen in EVE Online, some of the best players in EVE don't even log into the game. They're playing this game in a way that the game developers never even predicted, right? So for us, peer-to-peer trading is enabled, and now a person might never play the shooter that we made. They might say, we are going to be the masters of the peer-to-peer marketplace, and we are going to create all of these interesting DeFi applications on top of that. So I think it's like, yeah, the realm of possible players is going to be greatly expanded past what you'd consider like a typical gamer in like a free-to-play game.
I think about it as some people actually equate blockchain gaming with play to earn, but actually it's the first, I think, iteration of what this actually looks like. I believe that play and earn is a lot bigger, actually. So play to earn is essentially the equivalent of gold farming, like in traditional games, right? And I think there's a huge market for that because there are more people that live in emerging markets that actually where this could be a replacement for income, especially when there's hundreds of blockchain games options and they can move from one to another as they're doing incentives. But actually, like if you look at the kind of 2 billion plus gamers today, the trade-off, the decision making is, okay, I can play this Call of Duty game, but if I can play another Call of Duty game and earn money while doing that, I probably would rather do do the latter, all else being equal in terms of the game being fun, deep, etc. And so that's really the promise here is that you have some people maybe earning an income, but you have a far larger group of players that actually can just earn some amount of money or have fun speculating, but mostly are just playing the game.
And what I love the most about it is kind of the impact this has on the player. So the stakes are higher, right? It's no longer bits and bytes. It's still bits and bytes, but it's no longer just bits and bytes that you check out and it's done. And so at Star Atlas, what's super cool is I observe that we see these player organizations, and you might see this too, these player organizations springing up around the game and getting involved and almost becoming their own mini companies in a way. They're mini literal organizations. So because these stakes are higher, we see that the players getting involved on a much more real level and investing themselves further than in any gaming space before.
Totally, yeah. I recently learned that in EVE, I guess there were corporations that actually had like their own HR departments. And so I guess there's some precedent for this even in Web 2, but I think Web 3 will just kind of blow the top
Floodgates
off.
are open.
Yeah, actually, like EVE Online is a great example of that, where it's like an OG guilds, right? And like digital economy metaverse. There are like thousands of corporations, and some of the largest of these corporations are 10,000 players strong. And they have roles, responsibilities. There's like a warlord at the top of that, CEO of that. These are real life experiences that actually these players, and EVE Online is like 15 years old. So imagine how much more real that becomes when you have this tokenized economies. You can have these corporations or guilds that actually maybe fractionalize and sell their own equity type of thing. And another guild can actually help fund, like their first pool of ships that they're building. I think it just opens up so much more possibility when it becomes like an open economy, to Pele's point.
Exactly.
Totally. I can't wait to see some activist hedge funds acquire.
It's already
gaming
happening, right? It's
corporations.
like they're acquiring land, which is why it just opens up the possible. I think what you'd consider a player of your game has drastically changed in an open economy. A hedge fund is a player. A person who's a mother who has never played their game in the Philippines is now a player of your game. Right? So I'm a player, right?
Yeah, I think things are going to be pretty wild. Okay, changing track a little bit, and we started touching on this. I think for Web3, a big part of the appeal and what's unique about it is composability, the fact that the assets that I own or earn in-game could have uses in other applications, on Salon or on whatever L1. So, which is a pretty new concept for anyone, but especially games and game builders who previously fought for a lot of control over the experience and over the game economy. So how do you guys see composability sort of growing from here, or if you do, or if you think games will still be largely closed loops? How does this play out? And I guess, Michael, you can start with that.
Sure. Well, there's kind of two main approaches to composability in gaming, and that we've seen arise. And one is kind of this black box architecture, where you have the blockchain layer integrated, and there's integrated kind of loosely. Like, it's on a server. It's more of like a typical client-server relationship with the game client and the game logic executing on the server side. What I think is going to continue to evolve is we're going to see game mechanics transfer over to the smart contract layer on the blockchain. And the reason for this is that we're working with people's assets here. And as a user, security and trust in the workings of the game, I think, are paramount. And if you can have game mechanics through this layer on the blockchain actually working together across ecosystems even, then the value add to the user is immense. It adds that security, that trust, and will grow the ecosystem as a whole.
I think about your question in terms of interoperability of in-game items, right? And so I think that you typically don't see that right now in Web2 games, and the reason is pretty simple. It doesn't benefit the game publisher. If you're a game publisher, you have a game with 100 million players. Why would you let another game studio actually be able to use a very popular item in your own game? First and foremost. But, and that's separate from, interoperability is great for the player. Basically, you buy the item once, and maybe you can use it a few different other ways and get a lot more value out of the item. The question is just on the other side. What's the incentive for the game studio to actually allow interoperability? And then you get into practical considerations. Game studios are building games on different gaming engines. So how does that work when one is on Unreal and the other is on Unity? Then there's it's one thing to imagine if you bought a skin, then maybe you can use, I don't know, a hat or something, in your avatar, use it on another game in your avatar there. But if the game actually has, if the in-game item has power, how does that translate to another game? And so I think there are a lot of real-world sort of implications of interoperability that are just remains to be seen. But I think it will definitely take a studio that wants to really experiment with that, and potentially we'll see it first with a gaming publisher that is allowing interoperability between a few games in their ecosystem before we'll see it between studios. We'll see.
Yeah, totally. I guess it's basically there's a financial incentives piece of why do I care if why I have no incentive to let other games interoperate with my assets, and then there's a logistical and mechanical challenge to this.
A blockchain gaming founder, I asked him this question, once told me, why would I let another game developer vampire attack my own game? So I do think there's I'm very interested in seeing the first execution of interoperability.
Totally. Okay. So I want to switch tracks again a little bit to the user experience or the gamer experience, right? Because I think one of the consistent pieces of feedback that people give about Web3, whether they're gamers or otherwise, is that it's an awful first-time user experience. I have to go get KYC'd in exchange, get some coins, put them on a wallet. I now have to custody that wallet and make sure I don't lose the seed phrase, et cetera, et cetera. How do you guys think about solving that first-time user experience for gamers, on your games? I guess this is for Michael and Alex.
Sure. Well, our solution at Star Atlas is through the user experience. So we kind of prioritize that experience over other things and focus on making the experience as native to the gaming industry as they're used to. So you're right, exactly. When you get into crypto, there's a lot of barriers in the way, and there's some knowledge barriers and physical barriers just getting your assets in the first place. So I think any game that's going to be successful on the Solana blockchain needs to solve the user experience and the onboarding ramps for those users through simplifying their interfaces and improving the experience end-to-end, as well as the training and documentation and just knowledge building for the community.
Yeah, so and I guess from how the way that we're approaching it is we're going to be the first end-to-end wallet solution, like integrating FTX. So a person is literally going to be able to sign up for our game, create a username, and they'll automatically have an FTX account. And our goal is to just abstract away all of the complexity from the player experience. The player doesn't need to know anything about a seed phrase. All they need to know is their assets are there, they're safe, and they can do whatever they want with them.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, okay, I'm going to probe on this one a little bit more. My hypothesis is that at the start, the vast majority of gamers, especially those that are not crypto native, don't care about self-custody, right? Like they're perfectly happy with some sort of custodial solution. But the thing I wonder about is, what, and so maybe it's like initially it's like 98% of gamers custody, and then there's like some 2% who actually care about this, and not your keys, not your coins kind of attitude. Do you guys have a view on like how quickly or how many people might go into that self-custody mode? Like, are we going to be in a world in which like everyone self-custodies, or are we always going to live in a world where some people just don't want to engage with it?
I think just like you have, casual players and hardcore players, you're going to have people that are more casual about, self-custodying, saying, I don't care about the complexity, I just care about the fact that my assets are safe in whatever custodial wallet they're in. And then, of course, there will be, hardcore players who have millions or maybe even, tens of millions of dollars in assets, and they say, you know what, I really want to understand how this works, and I want to, have the knowledge that, I own everything myself, right? So, but I think that will be a small fraction of gamers.
Totally makes sense. Yeah. Once you have enough money on the line, you're like, well, maybe I should take better care of it. Okay.
On this onboarding point, I'm just saying one thing. I mean, the first time I started playing Axie Infinity, I think it took me 36 hours to actually start playing the game, or like longer than that. And then in terms of just going through the entire journey and trying to get money out of Axie Infinity, took me a couple of days before it finally settled. And I mean, the fact that they're doing over like 10 million in revenue a day right now just speaks to how badly people want to play that. Because because in the Web 2 gaming world, game developers actually think about time to fun in the span of like minutes rather than days, and because people's attention spans are short, like if there's hundreds of options or thousands of options for you to be playing from or choosing from. And so I think we're a long ways to go in terms of just making, not just gaming, but just actually like DeFi Web3 experiences easier for just your average normal consumer. And I think like people who solve that are just going to are going to be at an advantage.
Totally. Yeah. It didn't take me 36 hours, I think, initially, but it was like 12 for me for Axie. Okay.
I'm technologically inept, so I think that's why it took me so long.
Okay. But so, yeah, clearly there's like this onboarding piece that's a challenge, but I'm curious, I guess Alex and Michael in particular, like from a game builder's perspective, what do you think are the biggest challenges or risks for aspiring or people already building Web3 games in terms of like actually being able to realize their visions? Like what's hard?
Yeah, I think when you build any game, whether it's a Web3 game or like a Web2 game, it's all about like layering complexity. So you usually have your early life cycle, your mid cycle, and then your end game. And the way that you bring a player through that is you give them something easy to just start getting going on. So for us, we have a shooter built on top of a strategy game. The shooter is meant to be a game mechanic that's just very well understood. Everybody knows how to play a shooter. We're going to bring people through the funnel, through like a very easy to understand shooter, and then we're going to start introducing all of the complexity of the strategy game in like the mid funnel and then the end game. But I think every blockchain game developer today should be very careful about how much complexity they introduce to the player day one, because we do have open economies now. These open economies are extremely complex. There's a million things you can do in these open economies, but you don't want to expose the player to so much complexity on day one that they just like throw up their hands and say, I don't even know what to do, because they will leave your game.
And kind of tapping to that last thought about the economies, it's like when you're building a game and you're kind of a steward of that realm of what you're building for the players, and it's your job kind of to ensure that you're not messing it up for them, right? So you create a $300 million economy for them, and their assumption is they can keep existing in it, playing to earn and having a great time. So there's also, in the crypto gaming space, some awareness that needs to be built towards that, and figuring out really how do you integrate changes in your gameplay safely without disrupting that for the user.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of this is, I call it also just community-driven game development too, because you're constantly communicating with your players. Like, you see all these Discord communities around blockchain gaming; they're extremely collaborative. So, if you're going to introduce, changes to your gameplay or to your meta, like, you need to surface these changes, like get the okay from your players that they understand what's going to happen, and they're good with it. And then, yeah, you can make the changes. But unlike in free to play, right, where you make the changes with the release of a new update to your app, I think in blockchain gaming, you need to be a lot more communicative with your player base about upcoming changes.
Awesome. Okay, so far, people have tried building Web3 games for a few years now, but we've only really started seeing standout successes pretty recently. And I'm kind of curious, as you look forward, whether it's like 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, Amy, are there any particular themes, whether it's genres of games or something specific that, categories of things that you think will be particularly successful in the near term? Like, is it hey, card games are good for NFTs, and so I expect card games to do well. I don't know. Do you think about a genre lens or any sort of specific category that you're particularly excited about?
Yeah, there's a number, and I think at a high level, it starts with how big are some of these genres today, right? And then you can go from there. The largest game genre is actually shooter games. And so I actually think some of the first shooter games we're going to see, or some of the first games we'll see dropping NFTs on a mass level are going to be shooters. But I'm not sure that those are necessarily in and of itself going to have the deepest integrations with blockchain. And so, some of the genres I'm super excited about are, MMO, just because it's the closest to the idea of the metaverse, right? And so, moving from a artificial digital currency to tokenized currencies seems like a very natural step. In addition to just launching NFTs, which I think we'll see. We're seeing companies doing that now. We'll see large gaming publishers do that. But I feel just that in itself is. Doesn't actually explore the full potential of blockchain. And some of the other genres that are interesting, definitely card collectibles, because literally you have collectibles as part of the core gameplay. And then I think Forex games, land strategy games, super interesting because again this concept of the land sale then becomes organically incorporated into a game as well. And so I think in terms of more mid-core gaming, it's interesting because these are games in which some players, get super involved, and you have really deep game economies that blockchain will actually deepen. And also you can do a lot with experimentation around tokenomics in some of these, mid-core games. So those are some of the genres that I think about.
Yep. I think honestly, a lot of these genres, almost any genre, can have a land mechanic or a territory capture, territory control. Even if you consider your land mechanic just your home base that you're decorating, there is always a reason to have a place of permanence that you consider your home, especially as we gravitate more towards this metaverse or virtual world vision.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. Okay. And I think this might be the final question to leave it off, and this is for the entire panel. But what do you guys think are the key factors for success to make a Web3 game going forward?
I can start, and then love to hear from the game makers. For me, what am I looking for right now? Again, we're at the ground floor. Basically, Axie Infinity is pretty much the only mainstream blockchain game that's live right now, and I think that in the near term there is a first mover advantage. If you're going to launch your game, I don't mean launch NFTs, I mean actually launch your game, in terms of players playing it, because there's way more people who want to play a blockchain game than there are actually live games out there right now. But if you fast forward, some of the best games take years to build. I think Valorant took 7 years to build. And so once there are hundreds of games out there, then people have choice. And again, like I think it's not enough actually to have just like play to earn dynamics. You actually need ways to capture and retain players long term. And in the Web 2 world, you see, some games have like decades of longevity because of these like social layers and ways to capture the audience for long periods of time and really build affinity to the game. And so, in terms of what we're looking for, I mean, I think that in Web3, your ability to build community is absolutely essential. Like, I've talked about that a lot. However, it's very difficult to build a great game. And so, when as an investor, I always look for game-making experience in the core team. It doesn't need to be, if you're founders, ideally somebody on your team has game design experience. But if you don't, that you have hired somebody onto the team with that experience, because I think it's absolutely essential in terms of building a game, particularly in a more complex genre.
I mean, my answer is sort of simple, that all blockchain games need to remind themselves that they're games, and in order for a game to stay around for 10, 20 years, that game must be social. And I think one of the things that we're seeing in a lot of these play-to-earn games is that sort of two classes of players have emerged. You've had these antisocial, gamers, and basically the antisocial grinders, and then you have antisocial speculators who typically buy an asset and never come back to your game. But games last a long time because the communities that form. So I think sort of like what Amy's saying, like community is extremely important in blockchain gaming, and the game mechanics need to reward, socializing and community building within those games. And in a lot of these blockchain games today, you can be a completely antisocial gamer and still accrue something of on-chain value. But I think in the game that we're designing, at least, we are saying that in order to actually accrue significant value, you need to be part of a clan. You need to do these social activities. And I mean, in any game, like in any long-lasting game, whether it's World of Warcraft, Guild Wars, whatever, or in real life, like the only way to to accrue real value is by working with others or contributing it back to your community.
I like to think of the place we are right now in crypto gaming as kind of like the Flash era of crypto gaming. If you guys remember back in the early 2000s, there was a lot of little 2D interactive games that were flooding the internet and were a lot of fun to play. And where we're moving next is, and the next steps for gaming on the blockchain is high fidelity of fantastic end-to-end user experience and a AAA feel to what you're pushing out. So once we move into that realm where studios are actually creating these immense and immersive experiences already integrated with a blockchain layer, that's going to seal the deal.
So yeah, I believe in social a lot more than I believe in AAA. I think in the past year or 2 years, we've seen a lot of amazing, amazing games that have ascended to the top, whether it's Valheim, Fall Guys, that have had hundreds of millions of users, millions and millions of concurrent users. And they have been successful not because they have the best graphics, but because they have the most social gameplay. And I think that's why games last a long time, because of the bonds that you form with your friend groups. We have people in our games that are only friends with people in the game. Like, they call each other by their nicknames in the game. Like, that's why games last. So it's not going to be AAA experiences. It's going to be social games.
I totally agree. I mean, this is where the average player on Roblox plays for 2.5 hours, which I think is insane.
Yeah.
There's actually people on average in these top games, whether it's Fortnite or a game on Roblox or League of Legends, actually spend more time there than actually in social networks necessarily. Then, which is why, I think, although gaming and social are coming together, and we believe at Lightspeed at least that actually the next social networks may be born from games.
Yep.
And so it's 100% agree with you on the social element of it.
And we're making browser games, which are by definition not high fidelity. But what they are is extremely social. Like, I can send you a link and you can play with me in a matter of seconds. And our goal is to bring billions of players to this new Web3 economy. And you can't do that unless your game is social, has game mechanics, are social, and is extremely shareable.
I think you're absolutely right. And it's not either social or AAA experience. I think the thing that's going to seal the deal and be the game is social and AAA.
Maybe. But But I think with Roblox, we have definitely seen that you do not need AAA
I
experiences
100% agree.
to have an amazing, vibrant economy.
Yeah. Interesting.
Interesting. Some dissent on the panel. I guess my 2 cents on this one is that as a gamer, at least, I'd love to have both, so I can at least use my expensive graphics card for something.
Yeah.
If you
Okay.
can get one.
Yeah, that's true. If I can get one. All right. I know we're at time. I'm going to sneak in one last question, which is, if you had, is there any game that you've played in the past, whether as a kid or whatever, that you really enjoyed and wish someone would make a Web3 version of? This
I
is
loved,
for people
yeah.
out there.
I love Diablo, and so I grew up playing that, and I'm looking forward to buying NFT Diablo items. If that ever happens.
I mean, my favorite game of all time is Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. I'm a big RPG player, so if somebody made a Web3 version of that with an open economy, I probably wouldn't come out of my room for maybe a year.
I'm in the same boat as you. Action RPGs are where it's at.
Yeah.
I personally like Path of Exile. Diablo's fun too. Those items where you've got the randomly generated loot. Imagine if something super cool drops. It's an NFT. You can trade it. That's really captures my imagination.
Awesome. For me, it's a Web3 version of Darkest Dungeon, indie game for those of you guys who don't know. But anyway, so for all the game builders out there, there's a couple of multi-million-dollar ideas for you to go pursue. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for the time. Thanks, audience, for being out here. I think we'll wrap up now.
Awesome.